And welcome to the Stewartry Area Committee meeting.
John, can I interrupt you a second, please?
Certainly.
John, I think because you've got two devices on, it's causing interference. We're losing your voice totally.
Right, I'll turn my iPad off. It's the first time I've tried to use it. I was keeping it on for the chat function, but I'll certainly turn it off. Good morning and welcome to this meeting of the Stewartry Area Committee on the 17th of November 2021. Meetings are now being held very differently as due to public health regulations and COVID-19 we are using Microsoft Teams to participate. This meeting is being recorded and the recording will be made available on the Council website for public listening. Could I remind members to follow the good practice guidance, which includes muting microphones and switching off their videos when you're not addressing the meeting. Should you wish to contribute to any item, please write speak in the Teams chat function and you'll be invited to speak in the order. Should your question or issues be raised by a previous speaker, please withdraw your request to speak. The usual standing orders apply, including that any votes will be undertaken by roll call. If any member has to leave the meeting for any reason, can I remind you to either leave the Teams meeting for that period of time or write leave in the Teams chat function and then join when you rejoin the meeting. Could I ask the clerk, Claire Rogerson, to provide the sederant and any apologies, please?
Okay, thank you, Chair. We have 7 members present, all on Teams. Currently not present are Councillor Campbell and Councillor Davidson.
Thank you, Claire. Do members have any declaration of interest?
Chairman, I have no declaration of interest. Rob actually put a message on saying he was going to be slightly late. He's getting a repair done in the house.
Thank you for that. Members have the minute of our previous meeting on the 19th of May for noting. We'll have in front of us this morning 2 performance reports from Scottish Fire and Rescue, which is agenda item number 4, and I'll take these in turn. The first of these reports is the performance report from the 1st of April 2020 to the 31st of March 2021. Members are asked to scrutinise the performance report for the Stewartry covering that period, as detailed in Appendices 1 and 2. If I can just add, it's very encouraging to see that the statistics for the Stewartry are very good despite the ongoing challenges of COVID. In particular, it's very good to see that during this reporting period, there was an 8% reduction in the total number of incidents attended within the Stewartry compared to the previous year. A 50% reduction in the number of accidental dwelling fires. Unwanted fire alarm calls are also down by 6%. It's so reassuring that Stewartry continues to be one of the highest performing areas in Dumfries and Galloway and in fact in the whole of Scotland. Sadly, there was an increase of 2 in all fires during the period, which includes, sadly, 1 fatality. We hopefully have Susan Maxwell and Colin McKenna here to answer any further questions from the committee. So I'm handing over to members. If any members want to scrutinise in further detail this report. Members? Councillor Stitt.
Thanks, Chair. It's just a wee query about the retained fire services. I'm quite disturbed that when you see the figures for Dalbeattie, the weekend, Friday to Monday, it's down about as low as 80%. I know I've asked this at a couple of previous meetings, and they still seem to be struggling to get people to join on the service.
Could Susan or Colin answer that, please?
Good morning, Chair. Thank you very much for allowing us to speak. Just for your information, Station Commander Colin McKenna is unfortunately is unavailable to attend this meeting, so I'll be representing Colin McKenna on his behalf. My name's Group Commander Scott Irving, and so it's obviously so that minutes accurately reflect the Colin.
Thank you.
With
Thank you
regards
and welcome to the meeting.
Thank you. With regard to Councillor Stitt's question or query in relation to the retained and the figures in particular to the LBT, you'll appreciate, obviously, we are still very much in the throes of a pandemic. So obviously, recruiting, has been a challenge, but we, as a service, are actively continually recruiting to seek people to take on the role of retained firefighter. Obviously, you'll appreciate that varies greatly across the area, depending on the station needs and the demographics. Sorry. Obviously, my colleagues just pointed out, and again, a number of factors that affect that is obviously we do have one member of staff who is obviously long-term sick, and obviously that does have a one person can make a significant difference to the impact. So if you appreciate that, the difference from appliance going out the door and being available, it can be as little as one person. So minimum crewing for an appliance to be available is 4. So if we have one person that takes that down from 4 to 3, that appliance is effectively unavailable. So we have some challenges with regards to obviously recruiting. Like I say, pandemic hasn't helped that because obviously people's primary employment obviously has changed quite considerably, and we rely on people who have stable employment within the local community to run the role of a retained firefighter. So you'll appreciate that the challenges that we've had over the last 18 months in terms of people's employment has an impact, and we're not immune to that in the fire service. So it does pose us some challenges, but I'd like to reassure members of the committee that we are actively continuing recruiting across the area, and we're currently in the process of looking at the retained volunteer duty system across the whole of Scotland. So there's work going on at a national level to look at how we encourage and promote the recruitment and retention of retained staff across not just Dumfries and Galloway and Dalbeattie, but across the whole of Scotland. So we are currently doing a number of projects that are geared about improving the experience of people who express an interest in joining the retained. So we are currently in the process of running different pilots, and one of those pilots is getting people into the station for a period of time, obviously before they actually go forward for any recruitment. Obviously, appreciate that does pose a challenge with the current restrictions in terms of social distancing and stuff like that, but the service is looking at alternative means to try and improve that engagement experience so people have a clear understanding of what the retained role is and whether that's something that they see themselves taking on. So hopefully that answers the questions. I'm happy to take any other points.
That's fine. Thanks very much, Scott. Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you for that comprehensive answer, and we fully understand the reasons you gave there. I'm actually going to turn my video off because I was breaking up. So we've been asked to scrutinise the performance report. If there's no further questions, I will take it that we have fully scrutinised agenda item number 4. Is everybody in agreement with that?
Aye, Chair, I did put in a speak please. It's obviously not come up on your screen.
Thank you. Could you take this opportunity to speak? Thank you, Ian.
Right. Aye, Colin, it's just regarding home safety visits between 1/4/20 and 31/3/21. Home safety visits you issued 196 smoke detectors. From the period 1/4/20 to 36/21, you carried out 48 visits. Are you in a position to say if you were handed out and fitted any smoke detectors during that period in these 48 visits?
Thanks for the question. Could you just repeat the dates, please?
On the first report, which comes from 1/4/20 to 31/3/21, during your home safety visits, 196 smoke alarms were installed. The date 1/4/20 to 36/21, whilst there was 48 visits, it didn't indicate how many smoke detectors, if any, were installed during these visits.
Right, okay, so during that time we had We had 5 faulty smoke alarms that were replaced without home fire safety visits. And I'll have to get back to you on those actual figures, but we don't normally go and do a home fire safety check without fitting any alarms, so that appears to be missing from this. But I will get back in touch with you with those figures later on this morning, if that suffices.
No hurry, just when suits, no hurry for it.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll move for the second time to the recommendations. I don't see any further questions coming. Members are asked to scrutinise the performance report for the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service for the period 1st of April 2020 to 31st of March 2021 as detailed. So that's it, fully scrutinised. Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 5, the next report is also from the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service, this time the quarterly performance from 1st of April 2021 to 30th of June 2021. Members are again asked to scrutinise the performance as detailed in Appendix 1. So have we any questions from any members, please? If there's no questions forthcoming, we'll again move to the recommendations.
Jane, John, I think Jane's want to speak.
Right, I'm finding it very difficult to see, so please just shout in if you're wanting to speak. I'm just working purely on my iPhone now.
Oh, poor old you. Right, no, that's impossible. I can see that's really difficult. Chairman, if I could ask the fire service, in the past, I'm sorry, it's probably in here, but I'm not absolutely clear. There was fire setting and on forestry land up round the Glen Kens, and there were, fires set and that sort of thing. Has that now diminished? I know this is kind of the spring to summer. It's not the whole of the summer period. What's the current situation? Has it got better?
Thank you for the question. I'll pass you on to my colleague, Susan Maxwell.
Just over the sort of summer period, we did have a period of time where there was a lot of young people going out into the forest areas, and whether wittingly or unwittingly, they did manage to set fires which were noted by members of the public, and we did get turnouts to those areas. We did a lot of work with our colleagues in Police Scotland, who may mention this as well, and there was several people that were interviewed about this, so hopefully that will answer your question.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, really, it's just to know that we've got on top of that problem, because it was extremely anxious-making, particularly when there was a big forest fire up in Mossdale last year, and I know how frightened people were. So, just generally speaking, on the whole, do we think we've probably got on top of that particular problem? It's become less of an issue.
It's certainly become less of an issue, and like I say, we did work with Police Scotland and also with our colleagues in the Forestry Commission, who we work with on a sort of monthly basis at meetings for rural crime. And like I say, there was several people that were interviewed, a couple of local people and other people that were just back from being at university, etc. And like I say, I'm not saying there was sort of malice in it, but I think things just got out of hand a few times, which sort of caused these issues. And like yourselves, we don't want any issues like the big fires that we had at New Galloway as well. So hopefully it's sorted itself out now by all the partnership work that we've done.
And just to reinforce what Susan said, I think there also has to be a recognition that, as a result of the pandemic, we've seen a greater demand for people accessing outdoor and for, that they stay at home and stay local so that influx of people that, probably doesn't help what we've seen in terms of the incident type. So, yeah, I accept Susan's point that, for many of those incidents, there may be no malice in it. It's just that, we've got a greater number of people using and exploring the outdoors. So it's reasonable to, to anticipate that we may see an increase in accidental fires in that environment. So.
Thanks, Chairman.
Thanks, Councillor, and thank you for that input. It's an ongoing concern, as probably our summers are going to be warmer and drier going forward, so we may have to find a way to educate the public more on this danger. Thank you very much, and if there's no further questions, I'll thank you for your presence here this morning, Paul and Susan, Scott and Susan, and we'll move again to the recommendations.
Thank you.
Members are asked to scrutinise the performance report for Dumfries and Galloway from the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service for the period 1st of April 2021 to 30th June 2021. And I think we've fully scrutinised that, so thank you. The next report is the Health and Social Care Performance Management Report and Appendix, which provide a community health and a social care directorate and locality overview for the period January 2021 to June 2021. I am pleased to see that the quality indicators in the report classified as red, amber and green, although obviously in our reports we've just got it in black and white, but I can assure you there's only one red indicator, and that's in relation to outcome 7. And perhaps Sharon Walkers, who's here today, Sharon Walkers is the interim locality manager. Perhaps she could give us a wee bit more information regarding that one red indicator. But on the whole, the report is very encouraging, and we know that this is quite a difficult and stressful time for our health and social care providers. So welcome to our meeting, Sharon, and I wonder if you could explain the red indicator. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for your appreciation around some of the challenges, the big challenges we have within health and social care at the moment. The red indicator, for those who are having their copies in black and white, it is around the percentage of referrals to MASH acknowledged within 5 days. Can I just check, Chair, that's the one you're want me to talk about?
It is, thank you, Sharon.
Yeah.
Perhaps you could explain the acronym MASH as you give a report on it. Thank you.
Yeah. What I'm going to do, Chair, is actually pass this to my colleague, Shona McDowell, who's here as the locality manager social worker, who will be able to give you more detail around that particular outcome. Thanks, Shona.
Thanks, Sharon. Could you just, I don't have the copy in front of me because I've just came from another meeting, so could you just clarify that for me, what you're looking for?
It's about the referrals to MASH acknowledged within 5 days. Within Stewartry, it's only 12% and it's sitting at red. So would there be any reasons why those MASH referrals have not been acknowledged, Shona, from the team?
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, certainly that's an area, that we continue to strive to improve on in terms of that feedback to the referrers to let them know, what direction we've taken that referral. What I would say is that we've started to build and strengthen on our MASH processes and our MASH team. So largely the referrer to feedback, when a referral is being made to MASH, that's now being done by the MASH team. So hopefully that'll see an improvement going forward and that it's more sort of streamlined. So hopefully, by the next area committee report, we'll see those figures increasing.
Thanks, Shona.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chair.
Could you explain what MASH is?
Yeah, of course. It's the multi-agency safeguarding hub. So it's made up of social work, police and health. So when there is a referral that comes in which has any concerns around the adult, which may be of adult support and protection concerns, then that referral is screened on a multi-agency basis to determine what the most appropriate course of action is going forward.
Thank you. That's an excellent explanation. I appreciate it. Have any other elected members got questions on this report? Councillor Drysdale.
Thank you very much, Chair. Hi, Sharon. It's good to see you this morning. You'll perhaps know that I've personally had a bit of palliative care and been dealing with some illnesses in the area. It was in Dumfries, but not in Stewartry. And I have had a meeting with Richard Greaveson and Julie White, which was really, really helpful. So they've been updating myself as to what's happening in the Stewartry with the new 8 home teams across the area. And I do believe the Stewartry team is doing really well. So thanks for all the work that you put into that. As you know, there's at least 9 agencies that work together on palliative care when people are at end of life. And because of the slight bed blocking or patient blocking, we're going to see a lot more of that in the Stewartry over the next winter period. So what I was going to ask was, my suggestion to the teams would be that we have some sort of leafleting for people who are carers and are doing in-home palliative care if they haven't had experience of that, so that they've got a list of the 9 or so agencies, or even just one communication key that they can contact during the day and one contact number that they can have during the night. And both Richard and Julie alluded to the fact that that would be most helpful just to help us through the next few months. Have you had any contact with them, Sharon? And do you think that's something we could possibly take forward? Thanks very much for your consideration of this. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Drysdale. No, I haven't had anything come directly to me, but we do have a home teams project team that obviously are overseeing the development of the home team. So what I can do is make sure that communication has got through to Gail Robertson, who's our professional lead at the moment for home teams. So if it hasn't, then I will follow that up with Julie White, myself, and see where we take that and move that forward.
May I come back in, Chair?
Certainly, Pauline.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I think that would be really helpful, Sharon. They did allude to the fact we might need some sort of budget just for some sort of leafleting or social media type of information, just so that the home team's data can get out to people who are doing this home care. So I really appreciate you following that up today. Thanks, Sharon. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sharon, a quick question from me. Do social work still run an out of hours service with a unique phone number just to social work?
Yes, they do. That's to the access team. And Shona can talk a little bit more about that if you'd like that, Chair.
That would be good. Thank you, Sharon.
Yeah, we do. So we have the team based within the Dumfries area of the region. There is a dedicated number, so that operates from 5 o'clock weekdays through till 9 o'clock the next morning, and over weekends as well.
Thank you. Any further questions from members?
Chair, you've got Councillor Maitland, Councillor Howie and Councillor Drysdale.
Thank you, Claire. Councillor Maitland.
Thank you very much. I would just like to support Councillor Drysdale about the issue of communication. Having been through the whole thing myself as well, but not in this area, I don't think that families actually really understand the process. And I think it's incredibly important that they get help early days. Sometimes it's very quick, and of course that's much more difficult, but arguably much better if people did understand the system for looking after people on a palliative basis. So yes, please, could I support Pauline on that? My question actually was about the issue of home care. Now, where are we? This is the number of hours. We seem to be really quite well down in the Stewartry. Is that right? The total number of care hours, C8, outcome 2, C8. We were at 401 and now we're at 370 in comparison to 572 for Dumfries and Galloway. But there is no indicator that this is a worry. Could I have some commentary on that, please?
Sorry, I lost my mouse there. Apologies, Councillor Maitland. Again, I'm gonna pass that one to Shona around the care at home provision. If there's any reasons underneath that that we're seeing that, Councillor Maitland. Shona.
Yeah, I'm sure you'll be aware that we're under significant pressure at the present time in terms of care at home and the capacity that providers have. I have to say that's not without them trying to, navigate their way through that. I think what they're trying to do is to be as innovative as they possibly can to try and maximise capacity within their current sort of carer and employment, that they have presently, but also in terms of that kind of recruitment drive as well. So we are seeing a significant decrease in the amount of people that are moving into the carer profession due to, other sort of factors within different organisations, that they might feel that they're able to get, more pay or, better conditions in terms of pensions and things like that. So it is a significant challenge. We are finding that care provision is quite difficult on a day-to-day basis. It is a juggle to try and meet the needs of people that we've assessed going forward because of that lack of capacity. However, I suppose people around the table may be aware that there has been a number of recruitment drives going out. There's been one by the partnership that's going out, and CAS are in-house service as well. So we've been quite successful in being able to recruit more carers within CAS and also healthcare support workers. So we're hoping that whilst the numbers that we've got through won't necessarily rectify that issue, it'll certainly go some way to try and help improve. And we'll keep a focus on that moving forward.
May I follow up, Chairman, please? That's interesting, and absolutely we do all understand the level of unmet need. I'm just concerned about it particularly being in one area rather than everywhere else, if you see what I mean. And does that mean that there are remote areas that are just struggling much more? But the other side of that is something which I think is a good news story, which is the number of people supported aged 65 years and older by options 1 or 2, and 28% in the Stewartry as opposed to 10 in Dumfries and Galloway. That strikes me as being also significant. So is there an issue about people taking control of budgets and sorting things out for themselves? And has there been more of an effort done in the Stewartry to promote this than elsewhere? Is it a model for other things that we can do? There's a sort of, I think there's a double story in that. I might be wrong, but it seems to me to be a good thing that we are managing to get people to engage with the self-directed support in the Stewartry on rather wider basis than we have in the rest of the region. I would be glad of comment.
Yeah, I'm happy to come in there. I think obviously what we are seeing is that not only ourselves as agencies trying to be as creative as possible to meet assessed need, but we're also seeing that from service users themselves and their families, trying to go down that more creative approach. I would say that obviously with self-directed support, it comes with a lot of different benefits, and that as you say, that you are in control of that. You have the kind of say about who you want to employ. I would say that also comes with some concern maybe for people that don't want to really be entering into that sort of employment contract at a time in their life where they may feel that they're more vulnerable. So that is quite difficult. And obviously with the PAs that they would be recruiting as well, I would say that we've had an impact on that sector as well, in terms of just like the care at home sector that we've had, that there has definitely been an impact there. But I guess the figures may just be representative of the fact that everybody's trying to think more creatively about how we're able to meet the needs, and obviously as a positive, and if that's increasing. I think the point that you made earlier on was about the sort of the care at home figures that's representative in Stewartry. I mean, I would certainly say that the care at home pressures that we have are representative across all the localities that we have in the region. It may just be that within Stewartry, which again, is rural, as you commented, and I think there has been pressures, prior to COVID as well, that they may be that little bit higher. But certainly we're seeing the pressures right across the region.
Thank you, Councillor Maitland. Do you want to come back?
Yeah, fine, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Howie.
Thank you, Chair. Sharon, outcome 4, 325 on page 34, delayed discharge. That one, which it's going to be a problem for years to come. But one thing which was being considered a couple of years ago was GP contracts, where GPs would be prepared to sign off powers of attorney. Do you know if there's been any development on that front?
Thanks, Councillor Howie. No, I don't know whether there has through the new. There is a new contract of a memorandum of understanding that has been produced, Councillor Howie, and I am not sure whether that is part of it. I can look into that a lot more for you and see if whether power of attorney is part of that new memorandum of understanding. Apologies, I haven't read it from back to front as yet, but I can certainly get back to you and let you know if power of attorney is part of that new memorandum of understanding with the contract. Very good, thank you.
Thank you. Can I ask a further question, probably again to Shona? Shona, I'm aware that the independent providers are paid between £18 and £21 per hour to provide care. And I think there's now a minimum wage for carers. But surely, I'm wondering if the Dumfries and Galloway Council's home care provision are building up staff, because I would imagine the working conditions, employment rights, pension rights will be a wee bit better working for the council than for independent home care providers. So is there a feel that should build up its own caring staff to provide the service rather than going to independent care providers?
Gosh, that's quite a difficult question, I suppose. I mean, certainly, you know, we have been, because of the current situation that we're in, we have been building up the capacity within our in-house service through CAS. But, you know, I would say, though, you know, that the private providers that are out there, you know, bring an awful lot to the table, you know, in terms of expertise and knowledge like our in-house services as well. So, you know, there's definitely a place for them in society and helping to meet people's needs. I mean, in terms of the direction of travel, you know, with the current situation and the pressures on care at home, I certainly don't know what direction that will go in terms of, you know, whether we'll continue to recruit, you know, whether we'll try to plug those gaps. I think we acknowledge that we need to do something. So, yeah, I suppose it's just maybe about watching this space and see what develops going forward. But certainly, as I say, there's lots of recruitment campaigns out there from our private providers as well. So I think I don't know. I mean, I was at a meeting earlier this week, and I think one of the providers was saying that, you know, I don't know where the people are going. Do you know, that seems to be the issue. It's the people don't seem to be there anymore. So, you know, I don't know if it's that people are moving away from the area, you know, to go to universities or to pick up new employment opportunities or what. But certainly, I think the role of a carer has probably been underestimated for, you know, a long time and possibly undervalued, which, you know, again, you know, if we didn't have the carers that we've had over the last while, where would we be? So I think there needs to be probably more dedication and light put, you know, on how heroic, if I can, for want of a better word, that role is.
Thank you. I appreciate that answer. Any further questions from elected members before I move to the recommendations?
No, just a very brief comment, if you wouldn't mind. I'd be a little concerned, actually, about the possibility of poaching staff from the independent sector, and that is the absolutely last thing that the council should be trying to do. I think you're absolutely right that people have been immensely undervalued as far as money is concerned, but you know, we would have been in a heck of a hole if we hadn't had the independent providers doing what they've been doing over the last years. So what the council must not do, as far as I'm concerned, life more difficult for our independent partners. It's all a big partnership. And I hope that is actually now beginning to settle down.
Chair. I can come back in that, if that's okay, just to make a comment.
Certainly.
Yeah, I think, yeah, absolutely. I think we're fully mindful, you know, of the case there, you know, and absolutely want to support our private providers as much as we can. So just really to give assurances that absolutely, you know, that's taken into consideration.
Thank you. Councillor Drysdale.
Thank you, Chair, for letting me come back in. It was just to make a point so that members are aware, but also just thinking forward, Sharon, with regards to palliative care, I'm sorry to bring this up again, but if somebody becomes unwell very, very quickly and there are no beds and there is no room in the Alexandria unit, they won't actually have a social worker. So there is no emergency number for people at home and home carers to be able to get access for advice and help. So on the leaflet, if we go down that route, as I'm suggesting, you do need a daytime community nurses number, which I think is where the focus of the communication comes through during the day. But actually at night, there's nothing unless you've moved on to the Marie Curie teams. And of course, that's a huge decision and depends on the state of play of the patient at that time. So I think we need, yes, a leaflet with the social work number or communication as to the social work number, but we need to be very aware, Sharon, that if there's no social work team on board at that stage, if it's a very quick and sudden death, very sadly, then there needs to be a nighttime emergency number as well if that patient is not going to be hospitalised. So it's just to make you aware of that, and I hope you can take those points on board. Thank you, Chair.
Chair, can I just come back on that, please? Councillor Drysdale, yeah, absolutely. And I think what we need to make sure is that we're covering as many bases as we can within any communication that goes out. And I think it's just to reiterate as well around the home teams that palliative care will be absolutely part of the home team model as we go forward. Obviously, we're still very much in that development phase of the whole home team. Obviously, we've got our core team, but it's about what surrounds that home team and that core team, and palliative care is one of our key areas that we will be linked into. But it's making sure that people know and understand at a very, very difficult time for both themselves and families. So it's making sure that, yeah, we get communication right. But it's just to reassure you, palliative care is part of that home team model.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much indeed, Sharon. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. And if there's no further questions, I'll thank very much Sharon and Shona. That's been a very informative session. I really appreciate your responses. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll move into the recommendations. 2.1, to note the overview in Appendix 1, and 2.2, recommend any matters from Appendix 1 back for consideration by the Integrated Joint Board where considered appropriate. Thank you.
Agreed.
Next on the agenda is a consideration of the end-of-year performance against the business plan for economy and resources. The key success section of this report highlights the part played by the economy and development staff in supporting communities through the effects of COVID, particularly in preparing and distributing food boxes, securing PPE equipment, the work of our cleansing teams, and the role of the economic development team in securing and distributing grant aid to our businesses. Personally, I'm very pleased to see the progress on the Clock Tower and the success of the Galloway Glens team, and we also note the Harbour Square Kirkcudbright developments and the support for the Birchdale Theatre in Dalbeattie. Members, I'm sure, will also very pleased to see the update on the Strategic Housing Investment Plan, and we have David Sutty and a Building Standards Manager, I believe, here to support this paper. So is there any questions from any members on the Economy and Resources End-of-Year Assessment and Business Plan report? Members?
Could I speak, Chairman?
Certainly. Councillor Maitland.
Thank you very much. Look, these what's been going on in terms of the input into the Stewartry has been terrific. In the written parts, but are there not parts of the business plan that should be telling me about employment and youth employment and all these sorts of things? I've only got sort of part and parcel of what Economy and Resources does. And it certainly doesn't tell me about issues of employment in the Stewartry. So I'm a little confused about what I've been offered to look at, Chairman. That's not taking away what good work has been done, but it's pretty thin.
Chair Simon Fieldhouse would like to answer that.
Thank you, Chair, through yourself. I'll take on board, obviously, Councillor Maitland's points. I believe, obviously, that there should potentially have been employment and sort of youth employment statistics that would be put in the report. I'm not too sure whether these are sort of done on a slightly sort of different timescale, but I will go back and discuss, obviously, with David Gardner and Lynn Burgess and ensure, obviously, all members receive a further update in relation to the employment position. I can only apologise that hasn't been included to date.
Thank you, Chairman. I might be missing something here, but it just seems to me it's very it's really quite scanty and does not tell me what's been happening in my ward or any of the other 3 wards in the Stewartry, which I think would be useful and helpful. So I think at that point that might be referred to the Economy and Resources Committee, if appropriate.
It appears that the chair is on mute. I don't know if you can hear me, John.
Thank you. The chair was in mute. My apologies. So we look forward to a further report giving fuller details for our wards.
Yes, Chair. I shall take that away and make some actions.
Thank you. Any other members wish to speak to Simon or on this?
There is one other issue, Chairman, forgive me, but I think it's appropriate to say, because it's particularly pertinent to the Stewartry. There is growing anguish and annoyance about a number of applications that are being sent up to the DPEA because of non-determination. And I am aware of the answer that I've been given with respect to staffing and vacancies, but I do want to reiterate in public that this is something that is making communities in the Stewartry, particularly in my ward, and Councillor Drysdale's ward and Councillor Campbell's ward, very unhappy. So I think that's also something that we might like to raise with the full committee.
Oh.
Sorry, Councillor Maitland, I missed the beginning of your intervention there.
I couldn't make Jane out very well either, John.
Sorry, was I not close enough maybe to my microphone? This is to do with the non-determination, fellow members, of planning applications. There have been a number of quite important planning applications that have gone straight up to the reporter's office in Edinburgh because they have not been determined in time. And there are perfectly good reasons. There are stresses and strains on the system, but it is incumbent, I think, on it to be publicly drawn to the attention of officers that it's making members of the public extremely unhappy. And I think we should raise that issue with the Central Committee.
Thank you, Councillor Maitland. That is an issue that members in the Castle Douglas and Crockett-Ford ward are well aware of as well. So we'll add that to the recommendations, and I'll ask Claire to phrase a suitable addition as part of the recommendations. Councillor Drysdale.
Thank you very much, Chair. I would totally agree with Jane and obviously yourself, Chair, with regards to the angst that's been caused because of these issues. We did push with planning and economy and resources. I think it was through economy and resources to try and get more bodies on the ground for planning and planning enforcement. And I think as part of this agenda item and in the report, we could probably really do with an update as to how planning is progressing with these recruitment drives, because we are constantly getting emails and phone calls with regards to the concerns ongoing. And we are allaying our constituents' fears by saying that there will be more recruitment and hopefully more bodies on the ground to help with all these planning issues. So an update on that, I would think, would be most helpful as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Drysdale. Simon, do you want to comment?
I'll take on board, obviously, members' comments and ensure, obviously, that I liaise with the relevant service managers to provide, obviously, the committee members with a full and significant update on progress at this moment in time, Chair.
Thank you very much. I see another hand up, but I can't see who it is. Sorry.
Chair, it's my own hand. Just to advise you that you do have David Sutty from Planning on the call if you want any response to the query on non-determination of planning applications.
Right, so David Sutty's on this call, Claire?
Yes.
Right. David, do you want to come in response to Councillor Drysdale's and Councillor Bateman's concerns?
Yes, Chair, thank you. There's a couple of points to that, obviously. The overarching one is the fact that resources for the service sit with the Service Committee, which is Economy and Resources. And obviously there has been a report recently about that. So I'm sure Steve Rogers, as Head of Service, will be bringing a further report to a future meeting of that committee to explain what we've been doing. I know a number of responses have been sent to members about individual wind farms, so I maybe don't want to get into the detail, other than just to remind members that there is if it's a major application for a wind farm, which most of these ones are, then there's a statutory determination period of 4 months, which actually isn't a lot when you've got to go around a whole load of statutory consultees, particularly getting landscape architect comments. That's been one of we have quite a logjam of wind farms that come in. What we normally therefore do is encourage a voluntary agreement called a processing agreement between the applicant and the agent, which sets out a realistic timescale for an actual determination period. That's been very successful over a number of years. Unfortunately, one or two of the local applicants have decided that they are not prepared to sign up to this voluntary agreement, and as such they retain their right to go to the DPA after 4 months. So it is a situation which is certainly unfortunate and regrettable, but they are exercising their legal right, and unfortunately, because they are doing that, they are able to jump ahead of those who have done things more correctly, you could say, by entering into a processing agreement with us. That is, I'm afraid, a fact of the law. They're entitled to do that, but there's no way we can get around that. The only thing we can hopefully do in particular is get some additional resources to try and help. Firstly, with the landscape architect's comments, that's a clear logjam. We have advertised for an additional senior planner as well, specifically looking for somebody with wind farm experience to try and assist with that capacity. I hope that helps, Chair.
No, that explanation is very useful. Thank you, David. Any other comments from members? If there's no further comments, we'll move again to the recommendations. So members are asked to consider economy and resources area-based successes and developments as detailed in the key successes section. And 2.2, consider any aspects of performance to be referred to the economy and resources. And we are referring our concerns about the delays in processing planning applications and the numbers that are being non-determined and going to the reporter of the Scottish Government. Is that sufficient on that agenda item? Thank you, David, and thank you, Simon.
May I just briefly come in, Chairman, to ask about the issues to do with employment? It's just not to lose it. That's probably a file note to get an answer back to you about when that is actually reported. But if not, then we need it reported.
Thank you. Shall we add that to the recommendations? That we receive a further report and update on employment regarding this paper in our individual wards.
Yes, please, Chair.
I would take governance advice as to how that comes to us. I don't want to make extra work for anybody, but let's get the information that we normally do get.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's about the Area Committee making a recommendation back to Economy and Resources Committee about the information that they expect to see in these Area Committee reports.
And specifically detailed the type of information that councillors want regarding employment, youth employment, etc. in our individual wards. Thanks, Claire. So we're going to move to the next agenda item, which is for next agenda item for consideration is the Social Work Services End of Year report. This report comments on how hard social work staff have worked during COVID, and we're well aware how they've gone above and beyond the call of duty. It is very encouraging to see the work with foster, adoptive and kinship carers, and also the involvement of young people in interviews for new staff. It's good to see the support to care leavers and unaccompanied asylum-seeking children. It's also very good to see support to families through the Winter Hardship Fund. I'm not sure which figures in the key successes section of the report are specific to the Stewartry and which apply region-wide. So I'll ask that question from the officers, and I believe we have Stephen Morgan, the Senior Manager for Children and Family, and Gillian Grieveson, the Performance and Quality Manager, here to answer this question and hopefully other questions from the committee. So can I start with that question? Which figures in the key successes section of the report are specific to the Stewartry and which are to the region, are region-wide? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yep, the figures in the report are region-wide figures, and the reasons for that is some of the numbers of individuals are so small by presenting them in a ward basis or otherwise might identify individual people, so we tend to report on a region-wide basis.
Thank you. I appreciate that answer. Any other questions from elected members?
May I come in? Sorry, Chairman. I know you can't see the chat. So.
I can't see the chat.
Chairman, if I could just ask, it's reports we used to get about, for example, the numbers of placements that children had. I know how many changes of social worker have children had. And these are all of interest because I think they denote what sort of quality we are providing for children and continuity. And okay, I accept that that you can identify children on a ward basis, and that is not appropriate. But I need to know whether children in the Stewartry are being passed from pillar to post, or whether they've got splendid, stable relationships and a best chance of possible of moving into adulthood. So it's that sort of information which I used to get and I don't get now. So might I could have some help, please.
Okay, if I could come back, Chair. Yeah. Thanks, yes, Councillor Maitland. I think that's a very valid point, and what we will be doing as we move forward is reporting such detail through our new the promise and the regular updates that we'll give to Social Work Committee. We also include information such as this in the Chief Social Work Officer report, which was due to be presented in December, but unfortunately Lillian Kringles will be absent from work in December, so it'll come to the committee after the new year. I suppose we could repeat some of that information in in the reports to area committees, but it would still be on a region-wide basis. So it's just a matter of whether we report to the social work committee or repeat that here. Happy to do either.
Thank you, Stephen. It's a bit concerning, really, that we are unable to get any detailed information regarding the provision of social work services in the Stewartry, and we're only getting region-wide figures. It's probably something to discuss when we discuss the future of area boards later in this committee meeting. Have any other members got any thoughts on this? If there's no further questions, can I thank Stephen for his presence here this morning, and Gillian, if you're here, thank you for attending as well. And we're just going to move on to the recommendations. Thank you. So moving to the recommendations, 2.1, consider the social work services area-based successes, and 2.2, consider any aspects to be referred to the Social Work Services Committee. Are members happy to agree with the recommendations?
Chairman, with the proviso that your point is taken on board, I hope that officers are getting the sort of general gist that it's not quite enough for us to hear that the region's doing jolly well. You know, we're interested in the people that we represent, and they are on a much more localised basis. So I just want that to be clear. It's, you know, it really isn't telling me whether the services are meeting their targets in the Stewartry. You know, I'm just not understanding that. So I think it's something, you're absolutely right, that we can take through the area committee review. But I think there is an issue for each service to take on board.
Thank you, Councillor Maitland. I think all members would have fully agree with your comments there. So at recommendation 2.2, consider any aspects to refer to Social Work Services Committee and express concern at the lack of information relating to this particular area in this report. Thank you. And moving on to agenda item 9, the performance report for education and learning end-of-year assessment of business plan performance. Now, it's obviously appreciated that COVID and lockdowns have had a significant effect on schools and the children's education, and approaches to resolving some of the issues engendered through COVID were region-wide approaches. It was good to see mentions in 3.8 and 3.9 of how the issues of rurality for our young people in this area were addressed through technology. We have Jim Brown, Head of Education, here to answer any members' questions on this. And if I can start, looking back a couple of years, Jim, on the November end-of-year report, we got such a detailed information. We were able to compare how children in the Stewartry were performing in aspects like numeracy, literacy, reading skills, listening skills, not just with their peers in the Stewartry, not just with their peers in Dumfries and Galloway, but nationwide throughout the whole of Scotland. We had so much information previously, and again, there's an absolute lack of detailed information, if you don't mind me saying so, in this report.
If I take that as a question, that certainly wasn't the intention, and yeah, that's a shame that that's felt to be the case. I think what I've done in this report is put the highest level data that pertain to Stewartry schools, which you'll see, and obviously that is a good picture, and I think we are very pleased with the work of schools in terms of delivering that data. I'll happily reflect on the comments you made, Councillor Young, and perhaps, as with the previous item, await the outcomes of further discussions around what I should, or what would you prefer me to be reporting around. So if that's my error, that's my apology for it.
Thank you. I mean, I did have a look at the education report to the Wigton Area Committee, which took place about 10 days ago. And I mean, basically, apart from section 3.12 and a mention of Wi-Fi dongles, you could do a search and replace, search for Wigton or the West and replace with the Stewartry, and you'd have an absolutely identical report.
Obviously, the data in terms of school outcomes is the key point. I think, in terms of the last not just year but the last couple of years, it is the case that the focus has been around responding to COVID and the impact of COVID. That has obviously been done on a school by school basis, but equally as an authority guidelines. And I would say that I'm extremely pleased if that's, if you want a narrative around this, Councillor Young and colleagues, I am extremely pleased and very impressed to go further with the work of schools. This has been effectively a very operational hand-to-mouth existence in all services. And the fact that we've not only kept our schools open for the vast majority of the time, and in fact disproportionately open whilst comparing to other authorities in Scotland, I think if you look at things like the outcomes, which were contingent on an enormous amount of work from both teachers and central team members to articulate the alternative certification models, I think we can say that schools have really done extraordinarily well, and teaching staff and non-teaching staff have really delivered. So I can say that in terms of the data I've given you, relating to the Stewartry schools have done well. They have certainly kept their high attainment high. In terms of areas that I would wish to see, and you will share me with my desire on this, I would wish to see continued improvement around things like exclusions and attainment of looked after youngsters, looked after and accommodated youngsters, and exclusion. We are making significant improvements, and we are absolutely heading in the right direction. But I take your point, Councillor Young, that you would like to have additional local detail.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. I appreciate that. And I completely echo your views on how well staff and students have done during this incredibly challenging time. Liz Manson, do you want to come in?
Yes, thank you. It was just a point of clarification that I hope is helpful to you and the committee. You're absolutely correct, Chair, that normally what you receive for all of the performance reports is detailed statistical information and with a comparison against Dumfries and Galloway wide figures, and indeed in some cases, particularly for the education and learning reports, national comparisons. On this 1 year for 2020-21, it was agreed that there would be a lighter touch in terms of performance reporting, and indeed the end of year reports that service committees got just before the summer was also a much higher level than would normally be the case. So for your reassurance, the 6-month reports which are coming to your next meeting will be back to that format again, which will show you detailed statistical information for the locally reported performance information and a comparison with the Dumfries and Galloway wide information. So this was just a one-off for 2020-21, indeed for the reasons that yourself and Jim have both articulated, which is that it was an exceptional year, and on that case is that the Council had decided that the performance reporting would be light touch. So I hope that's helpful reassurance for you for the future. Thank you.
No, that's very helpful, Liz. It would have been good if that reassurance formed part of the papers, and that would have put them in better context, I believe. But have other members got any questions?
Councillor Maitland, Chair.
Councillor Maitland.
Thank you very much. Yes, the voice of calm, as usual. There's Miss Manson, calming us all. Good, right. Well, I'll look forward to getting a bit more detail on all of these things in the future. But the chairman's right. It's probably would have been a good idea to have reminded us. We've probably made the arrangements and all agreed, but we're members. We don't remember these things. Where if it isn't in front of us when we read about it again. The questions I want to ask in very particular terms is 312, which is about attendance and exclusion rate. And I don't totally understand the figures, please, Mr. Brown. The 93.02 number for exclusion rates.
There is, I think the point is that, are we talking about looked after and accommodated youngsters, Councillor Maitland?
Yes, we are.
Yes, we are. Thank you. So what that is that the value, and I take your point, the value of the attendance rate is a percentage, and that is taken of all the youngsters within any given group, looking at totals and dividing it by the maximum potential. The exclusion rate is not a percentage, that's per 1,000. So what that does is it looks at the overall numbers of individual exclusions, not the total numbers of days, but the individual numbers of exclusions, and then does that as a proportion of youngsters, because it's actually a very low number, small number. Rather than doing it as a percentage, it's done as a per 1,000. So to give a greater level of detail or accuracy, because then you can have you don't have to go to the decimal points. That's just the way it's done. But does that help you with the understanding of the values?
Yeah. No, I've got the values. I'm actually a little bit more concerned about the. I wondered whether it could possibly be a misprint, but I know that excluded children do suffer a greater likelihood of being excluded. But at the moment, if I've got that right, that's 1 in 10 of our excluded children, of our looked after children, is excluded, and that seems to me to be a very high number.
Absolutely.
Would comment on that, and is that again, are they being excluded from particular schools? Is the Stewartry bad for this, or is it good for this? I can't tell from this, from this report whether, because I know perfectly well as well in the past that there have been schools which have been very quick to exclude, and probably sometimes inappropriately. So it's that type of information, granular information, I think that the committee would be looking for.
May I respond, Councillor Young?
Yes, certainly.
Thank you very much. Councillor Maitland, I'm absolutely delighted that you bring that point up. I think you and I would share if you have a position around that data, that it is an extremely high rate. Now, I can tell you that has almost halved, or more than halved, in the last year. So we are moving in the right direction. You're absolutely right as well that, of course, different people do different things, and different young people display different behaviours. Exclusion is not a punishment. It is not a sanction. It's an opportunity for a school to put together a planning meeting to help support that young person with some plan in terms of addressing the factors that cause them the distress. So if we look, you're absolutely right. If we look at Scotland overall, we are looking very carefully at how exclusions are used, why they are used, and what is the response. There is national documentation around this. It's called IEI Part 1 and 2. Schools have to stick to that. We've got our own interpretation of that, or our own description for head teachers' use. I get monthly attainment exclusion reports, which I look at, and certainly we now have a policy which I insist on, that if there is any exclusion of a looked after and accommodated young person, that has to be reported, and there has to be a conversation with myself or one of my team to understand why it is for that particular situation that the head teacher feels that is necessary. We don't want to disempower head teachers, but equally we need to look at, as you have done, we need to look at the evidence to say if there appears to be a very significant discrepancy within groups, why is that happening? And are our processes supporting that to come into alignment? So I'm absolutely in agreement with you, and I would welcome if indeed this, there's a decision about area reporting that to include that data. I would be very pleased to have those discussions, and by all means have a further discussion around matters of inclusion, not exclusion, but inclusion, possibly as a member seminar.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Jim. That was a very interesting and full response, and I completely share your sentiments. Councillor Drysdale.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much, Jim. Just a quick one. I know we had some communication last night. Thanks for getting back to me. And there was a committee meeting which Councillor Maitland went to, not myself. But I know in the report, I just wanted to thank the hard work that's been done for ensuring wellbeing, and within the curriculum, the active school and community support team have been absolutely fantastic. There's been a lot more activity with regards to that, and I have been pushing, as we all know, for improvement in school meals and the take up on that. But what I wanted to ask Jim was, could you possibly, after last night's emails, give myself and other members, if necessary, a wee email update when you've got a chance? Again, it might not be your department, it might be Alison that got back to me last night on the take up of PEF for eligible children for their health and well-being going forward, because we haven't really had an update on that, and there has been some queries as to whether or not children can use that for cookery classes and other such things. There was a query as to whether or not funding, shall we say, through parent councils can be used for that as a top-up to make sure these classes go forward. So there's funding available until next year. But what we really need to know as councillors is, will that funding continue into 22 and 23? I think there's a little bit of concern as to that. So we just need some more detail on that going forward for the health and well-being of children. That would be helpful. Does that make sense?
I think so. Can I just put it back to you to... there are 2 points within that, I think. The first one is more detail around PEF, and the second one is some understanding of funding arrangements around health and well-being, or cookery, food technology courses, as well as technical courses. I can give you a very brief summary now, and I will happily do a collation of the PEF reports from individual schools within the Stewartry. They exist on school websites, they should do, and I'll put those together and send it to committee. You'll understand as well, PEF is obviously something that is entirely devolved straight from government to individual schools. Now, we have a role in reporting that to government, but that is very much based on what head teachers tell us. Equally, you'll appreciate that when we provide you with data, we have to have a very clear understanding of the validity of that data. Whereas, of course, if you have 100 and so many schools choosing their own assessments for whether a particular intervention has had impact, and that can be qualitative, quantitative data, all sorts of different types, it's very difficult to put all of that data together and say, sort of conflate it, and to say, well, it all means one thing. It doesn't. There are lots of different stories and ways of looking at things. And at the moment, obviously, that sits with schools, but I'll happily put that document together and send it you on. In terms of the I think originally it was called Cost of the School Day funding that elected members agreed to give schools over a 3-year period on a, but basically it was trying to give the line of sight, which helped the agreements around the DSM budgets, to say you have control over the entire school budget. What that has to include is all aspects of it, including, for example, the costs of the food and the wood and all the rest of it for either tech or home economics. and it is down to that secondary teachers in this case to make those decisions about where their spend is to meet the needs of their community. That's why we have area committees, because communities are different. And I think what we need to do is to look at that DSM arrangement to say, is it fully understood that the monies for that need to come from the DSM? Obviously, you'll know I've had experience of this personally, and that's exactly what I did. I cut my cloth. I made my choices. I discussed with my communities. I identified those areas that we had significant uptake in, and food technology and economics was one of them. And therefore, I funded that from within my overall DSM budget. That was there to cover everything. But I think perhaps there's maybe, again, a bit more information that I might give you. And again, I'm happy at any point at request to come and deliver seminars or just short sessions, information sessions to explain where we are in terms of things like funding for specific things. In terms of what you've asked me to get back to you with, Peth, I'll get you that document. In terms of the other matter, Councillor Drysdale, will that do, or do you need more information around DSM funding?
If it's okay, Chair, for me to come back in, I think what I'm trying to get to the bottom of is... Yeah, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Yeah, just wanted to come back in and say...
loud and clear.
Thank you very much. I think what I'm struggling with is, are you saying, Jim, that some schools for the children that don't get PEF for woodwork and for cookery, the head teacher can choose whether or not parent teachers associations can use funding for the children that don't need the PEF to buy the wood and the food? I think that's where I'm struggling. Is it so the head teachers have their own choice as to how that's managed? I think there's some confusion across the region as to, I think maybe different schools have different rules. That's what I'm getting to. And I think possibly we need to know what's happening in our own ward with our own schools as far as those two subjects are concerned. That's probably it in a nutshell. So I just need some clarity on that. Let's do as councillors.
I'm sorry, I interrupted you there. I think that's right. So the rules are very, very clear in terms of how PEF can be spent. The rules are very clear around what the DSM covers. So a head teacher has got the entire DSM budget for a school and what they can then do with that. That's very, very clear. I think what you're asking to me, which I don't have the answer to you today, but I will get it, is can a parent council for their own fundraising activities supplement a head teacher's funding of particular things in order to allow them to use their own DSM monies in a different way? I suppose to some extent you could argue, well, if it's all money, if you pay for that and the DSM is spent on another area, well, you could pay for that other area, for example, supporting out-of-school clubs. But I'll get you the definitive answer on that, Councillor Drysdale.
That is really helpful, and you've got my point exactly. Thanks, Chair. Thank you, Jim.
Good, thank you.
Thank you. That's been a very interesting discussion. Could you share your email to Councillor Drysdale with the rest of the committee members, please, Jim?
Of course I will.
And you make some excellent points regarding PEF. I mean, it's rather straightforward to schools to specify how they're spending the PEF funding. What we never seem to get is the outcome of that spend. I know it would have to be qualitative, but how do you measure the success of the spend in particular areas of the PEF funding? That's sort of never reported, how useful or how beneficial the PEF funding spend has been. What we usually get is how it's spent, not what the outcomes of the spend are. I wonder if you could talk to that a wee bit.
Yeah, certainly. It needs to be borne in mind that obviously in terms of overall education learning spend, PEF is a very small proportion. So in terms of what we do in schools for all of our youngsters, that is not by any extent the large part of it. However, it is something obviously that it is, and in some schools it is a large pot. The way around which PEF is allocated and the advice, the guidance around how it is monitored is clear, and that's government guidance. and that is in consultation. Councillor Young.
Right.
Some things easily measured in simple numerical statistic on how many young people, percentage-wise, gained 5+ national fives. That's a number. I think understanding causality or causation, I think that's what it is, causation within an intervention, which could be a nurture-based intervention on a young person who receives free school meals and PEF funding. That's a much more difficult thing to measure. And I may be more esoteric or something. And equally, because we don't necessarily have the big data sets on it, you can't. You might say anecdotally, for a given situation, the feedback is very good from the young person, or it might have affected a particular outcome very successfully, but there is no significance statistically in a result that has a single respondent. And so it is difficult to do that, and I think that's where head teachers are extremely skilled to consider each youngster who gets this funding and consider, well, what is it that would make the difference to close the gap for that youngster? Let's try some things out and let's measure them. And I use that in a advisory way. Let's measure them and see if the young person finds them useful, if they have an impact. Let's say it's an attendance matter that we're trying to look at. Does it just increase the attendance? But you'll appreciate if we've got, many hundreds, over 1,000 young people receiving this funding, all with different interventions or combinations of interventions, giving any kind of overall statistical summary around what works and what doesn't is difficult. There is work done, research work, that head teachers use to inform decision making, which gives guidance around relative things such as cost, impact, how much research evidence has gone into creating that confidence for head teachers. So there are things that are being used to inform decision making around this. But as I've said, Councillor Young, I think finding any causal evidence or data, statistically significant data outcomes around this is going to be very, very difficult. We have got the school's individual reports which describe what was done and, to some extent, the impact of those interventions.
Right, thank you very much for that. Any other members want to comment? If there are no other members, I'm getting a bad echo here. Can we move to the recommendations? And thank you, Jim, for attending the meeting today.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Young.
Moving to the recommendations, 2.1, to consider the Education and Learning Directorate area-based successes and developments, and 2.2, to consider any aspects of performance to be referred to the Education and Learning Committee. Are we happy to agree these recommendations? Thank you. We now turn to agenda item 10, the Community's End of Year Report up till March 2021. This report is very detailed, and I thank the authors for that. In particular, I'll mention just a few highlights from the key successes section, and then allow other members obviously to come in and comment. Again, many staff were involved in response to the pandemic. I'm pleased to note there's 319 face-to-face sessions delivered to the young people during this time period, and 46 young people attended youth work hubs during the lockdown period. Also, the isolation packs in very large numbers were provided to young people at what would have been a very difficult time for them. It's good to see that there continues to be a high number of community resilient plans in our area, and I believe this has been really useful over lockdown and as we come into winter. So very heartened to see the level of detail in this particular report, and I'll open the floor to other members. And I welcome Harry Hay, Stephen Herriot, Liz Manson and Vlad Valentin to our committee meeting this morning. Members? Councillor Howie.
Thank you, Chair. I'll kick off if nobody else is coming in. It's probably more directed at you, Stephen, regarding Kakubri Bridge and the £200,000 inspection. I appreciate that's a legal requirement to carry out this survey, but really, will this report give us a definitive answer as to the lifespan of the bridge? And if there's an indication that it's coming to its end, what plans do we have in place either to extend the lifespan of the bridge or ultimately to look at funding for a replacement?
Thanks, Councillor Howie. If I could come in there, and I've got Duncan MacDonald in the background as well, just with a bit more detail if that's required. We've obviously mentioned Kirkcudbright Bridge, significant structure within the Stewartry area, and we had spoken with ward members in the past on a number of occasions about our plans for the bridge, and made it clear that we thought it was prudent to undertake this very detailed inspection on a fairly complex structure with weight restrictions and complications in terms of its structural capacity over the years. And really the piece of work that we're proposing here is a very detailed inspection, more so than we would normally carry out as our routine principal inspections and routine inspections on our whole kind of asset base for the structures of over kind of 1,200 structures. So what we're doing at Kirkcudbright is very much looking at the future and looking at the options for the bridge, and it really comes around work we've done in the past to strengthen it, and work we've done in the past to maintain the weight limit on it because of the capacity issues, the structural capacity issues. And really the report is very much about answering the questions that you've raised, Councillor Howie, about options for the future. Does it require any further strengthening works in the short to medium term, and to maintain the capacity that we currently have? And also, are we looking at a time in the future, and maybe understanding better that time in the future where we might need to look at something more radical as a solution for the crossing at this point? But again, these are questions that we can't answer now, and very much the survey work that's set out in the report and is reported on to Communities Committee regularly, we would look to answer specifically the questions that you raised, Councillor. Thank you.
Councillor Maitland, did you want to come in?
Yes, please, Chairman. I want to make 2 points. Point number one was that the Australian ward event was surprisingly effective, even though it was online. And I'd like to encourage members not to be too horrified by the idea of an online ward event. It worked very well, and let me tell you, it was a contentious issue. So the opportunity for a rally was there, but it didn't work out that way. And I think it worked rather well. The next question is 3.8.2, Rescue and Bend service, delivering assistance to 340 families. Is that, how many does that kind of represent of the children, of the families with children eligible for free school meals? Did we actually reach a very substantial proportion of them? Can I ask whether there is a kind of link across between that team to the schools issue? Because we're still getting problems of low uptake of free school meals. It's gone back again, it's gone back. I think Councillor Drysdale and I listened to a parent council in Kirkcudbright saying that they were worried about the low uptake of free school meals. So I'm just wanting to be sure that whoever is responsible for that as a whole is taking it forward and urging families to take up the opportunity, because I mean it's a lot of money if you think about the opportunity of taking up free school meals if you're eligible. So those are the sort of a point and a question, please, to be sure that it is being taken up.
Thank you, Jane. Harry, do you want to respond to Councillor Maitland?
Yes, please, Chair. I'm very happy to answer the question in relation to
free school meals. The current arrangement that should be happening in comparison to what was happening 2.5 to 3 years ago is that families that are eligible for free school meals get automatic entitlement. Previously, I think it's fair to say that the two services, education and my service, worked through different processes, and families originally had to actually physically apply for what they're entitled to. And very often, as was highlighted, they're exactly the same families that are also entitled to other benefits that my team were dealing with. So to try and address that, there's now an automatic entitlement with an opt-out. Now, what that means is that somebody, in essence, has to apply to say they don't want it. Now, that might seem a little bit of a bureaucracy, but one of the things that we had to ensure is that for whatever reason, and there are some people, some families who choose not to have free school meals because they say that they don't want to claim it, that's absolutely their prerogative. My latest performance info, this is on a regional basis, is that there's over 90% of families who are entitled to free school meals that qualify for it and get that automatic entitlement. As members who also sit on Communities Committee are aware, we provide an awful lot of very detailed performance information in our welfare reform update reports that really drill into ward to ward basis as well as regional totals. So I am concerned that if there's a perception that free school meal uptakes has declined, because it's certainly something over the last 6 to 12 months, particularly because of the pandemic, that we have been really pushing for, along with the other suite of benefits and financial support that families are entitled to. And certainly there has been a considerably more joined up approach that when a family approach us or we are made aware through sharing of information that a family could benefit from support, we very much are proactive to try and make sure that happens with minimal barriers. So happy to share offline if Councillor Maitland perhaps wants to give me more details about particular schools. I'm quite happy to pick that up and drill down into a little bit more detail, because that is certainly something we have got a wealth of very current performance information on. Hopefully that's helpful at this point, Chair. Councillor Maitland, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Maitland, do you want to respond in any way?
No, I'm very happy to speak offline. That's fine.
Thank you. Councillor Stitt.
Thanks, Chair. I'll make reference at the bottom of page 76 to top of 77. I know it's not in my ward, Castle Douglas Playpark, but I'll give you a bit of food for thought. I was approached by a member of Castle Douglas Public last week when I came out of a funeral, and he made reference to a statement I made at communities that I thought Carlingworth Park would be an ideal site. According to this person, that is certain few in Castle Douglas. It is not the views of certain members of the public. And I just thought I'd bring it to your attention because I know it's dragged on, but I think there could be a lot of animosity caused if they go with this site, because what I'm led to believe that there was questionnaires put out, but not half the people got a chance to respond to the questionnaires. So I don't know who was dealing with the questionnaires, but I just thought I'd bring it to your attention.
Thank you, Councillor Stitt. I appreciate that update. I, as you know, have concerns about the way some aspects of this public consultation were managed, and in particular, I didn't like the options given. The three options given to the public were the Market Hill car park, and then they gave two options for Lochside Park. Lochside Park itself and Lochside Park caravan site. I mean, these sites are just 50 metres apart. So really the Lochside options were split, and although the Lochside Park won by, I think, about 30 votes overall, I think there's still a lot of work to be done to persuade the Castledug public that this is the right location for the park. But we have had meetings and things are moving forward. There is a subgroup of Castle Douglas Development Forum who are very anxious to make real progress on this. So we will await the next meeting with that particular group, which is early in December. But thank you for your input, Councillor Stead.
Right, cheers, John. No problem.
Councillor Drysdale.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'd just like to put on record a thanks to Stephen Herriot and the roads teams for all the hard work done during the floods. I know some members of the teams worked 36 hours through the night to fill sandbags, so thanks, Stephen. It was a great job by everybody concerned, and I know it was extremely tiring. And also the work done over in certain regions with regards to flooding and drainage cleaning. So thank you for that. Which brings me on to page 75, 3.7.2. I just wanted to chat and sort of bring you up to speed with my thoughts on community resilience. I think you're doing a great job trying to bring everybody together and keep that going post-COVID, but we are quite aware that we will see increased flooding, and we saw that during the recent events in the last few weeks. Now, I personally found DG Voss incredibly helpful. It really was fantastic over the weekend where we had all the interruptions to transport and people trying to get up and down, specifically in the Glen Kens, but I'm sure across the rest of the region as well. So what I wanted to make sure was happening going forward is there a way that we can use the home teams to liaise with the pharmacists and the community nursing teams? Because I noticed that Mountain Rescue was used in Moffat for one particular case to get drugs and a visit to that patient. So I know there were delays across our region and people were able to use DG Voss if they knew it was there. A lot of people don't know about it yet, to use the back roads to get up into the Glen Kens. So it's just some way of making sure the community resilience teams, the community councils and everybody else use cross-communication methods in order to communicate and make them aware that they can actually, it's not your ideal use of Mountain Rescue, but to get to a patient or get a community nurse to a patient, I think that's our only choice if we have the recurring floods again. So just really to ask you, probably it's you, Harry, hey, sorry, will you look towards better communication and, or is it you, Vlad, I'm not sure, to make sure that we can get that comms across so that patients do get the visit that they need in times of emergency. Thanks, Chair. Thank you very much, everybody here today.
Thank you, Councillor Drysdale. Vlad, do you want to come in?
Yeah, happy to come in and happy to also take that on board, and I can take that back to the resilience team. In terms of DG Voss, one of the things that I've asked for is to look at our communications and to look to see how we can improve on that so that the community can better see it and better access it. From experience of being on Facebook myself and being in maybe some of the local groups within Lochmaben, for example, I could see that there was maybe a lack of knowledge on it, and therefore I have asked to see what we can do to try and inform particularly these social media groups, that when they are reporting things through that social media forum, that in essence they're redirected to DJ Voss so that we've got a more comprehensive site for people to access. So that's something we're looking at, and more than happy to take on board the other comments as well.
That's great. Thank you very much, Vlad. Thank you, Chair.
No, thank you, Vlad. And I agree with your comments. DG Voss is sometimes quite difficult to find, and perhaps consideration should be given to it having its own Facebook page. Anyway, any other members got any comments? Can I make a wee personal thought, Stephen, about Kakubri Bridge? I know you're carrying out this 200 case survey on it. Would part of that survey be a consideration if the bridge went single track and perhaps carried a cycleway and a walkway controlled by lights on either side rather than the present setup?
Thank you, Councillor Young. That's a
Would that lengthen the lifespan of the bridge if some of the weight was permanently taken off it?
It might be a beneficial option if we wanted to focus. Again, with a lot of these old bridges, loading in the centre of the structure is better and avoiding loading on the parapets. So in terms of the assessment, we can certainly look at that in terms of prolonging the life of the bridge. The active travel sort of interface certainly was something that was discussed with ward members in the past, and that's something I'll make sure is included within the consideration of the study that we're undertaking in terms of the facilitating pedestrian and cycle movements, wheeled movements. Thank you.
Thank you. If there's no further questions...
Chair, you have Councillor Davidson who would like to speak.
Thank you. Councillor Davidson.
Thank you, Chairman. Apologies for my lateness. Glad to have been able to join you at last. I had two quick questions, please. First, related to Councillor Drysdale's point on flooding and, having been perhaps rather more operationally involved than is necessarily usual for councillors during the events in Dalbeattie. I am really very grateful to the efforts of all the staff who, to my certain knowledge, put in substantially more than their standard working hours in order to tackle the issues that arose there. And I think it's important to put that appreciation on the record. My question is, where we have incidents that occur that are perhaps unusual either in their location or the extent of their impact, do we look at what might have been the contributing factors to them afterwards? I should say that I know the flood risk management team are engaged in one of those sites at the moment at my request, which is much appreciated, because what happened appeared to be a little unusual. There is another location in which certainly what happened, the locations of it and the extent of it would, I guess, not be necessarily what we would have expected based on previous experience of flooding in the town. So any indication of what we do to have a look at that after the event to see if we can ascertain what caused it and whether there are any opportunities to mitigate it in the future, I think would be very helpful. And the second point was in relation to the Road Recovery Fund, where work, I think I would be right in saying, had commenced in Dalbeattie and is very welcome, I'm bound to say, because I think my other two Abbey Ward colleagues would agree with me that potholes are probably the source of much of the inquiries we receive at the moment, or they certainly were until the flooding happened. Clearly, I think I would presume that resource would have to have been diverted to dealing with the issues with the roads network that arose after the flooding. And I think that's absolutely understandable. I mean, I certainly saw locations where serious defects appeared very quickly, and those have now been repaired, which is really important. I wondered on that basis, and it's maybe not something that needs an answer in the committee today, but perhaps it's simply something that could be furnished to us after, an indication of when we're able to recommence the work in Dalbeattie, because certainly the inquiries will undoubtedly and rightly continue, I think, until folks see more patches put in, I think it'd be fair to say. So any assistance with those 2 points would be very much appreciated. Thanks very much, Chairman.
Thanks, Councillor Davidson. Stephen, do you want to respond?
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Councillor Davidson, for your comments on the flooding in Dalbeattie and the kind of support of the staff there. And we know that you were personally involved at that location as well. But what we're finding with the flood events, and depending very much on where the intense rainfalls are falling, in which catchments or in which kind of urban areas, we're finding the kind of weaknesses in areas that we might not have come across before. The likes of the Annan catchment was an incredibly high rainfall event, and a gauge at Bridekirk we recorded, it had been in for 50 years, and we recorded the highest level ever on the SEPA gauge there. So, and then we saw some flooding of properties on the back of that in that locality that we hadn't normally experienced flooding before, and we will kind of respond to that in terms of the flood team kind of responding with information on flood guards, flood gates, the subsidised flood product scheme. What we found in Dalbeattie, and maybe I can bring James in because I know he did a bit of digging on this as it was actually happening. We're kind of seeing surface water flooding and the kind of complexity of surface water drainage systems and combined surface water systems. And at that point, it becomes very kind of complex and more than kind of predicting, more complex than predicting what's happening on kind of river catchments, which by SEPA's involvement is still a fairly kind of complicated process. But the surface water flooding, what we're finding is we'll find areas where there are weaknesses, and we certainly will need to follow that up in terms of property resilience and what solutions, if are possible in due course, balancing that against all the kind of the work the team are already bringing forward in some of the larger schemes, flood protection schemes, as well as some of the kind of smaller works of maintenance and repair where we can bring flood risk mitigation and relief. So what I'll do is I'll maybe let James come in on that one in terms of the Dalbeattie situation. I think he probably has a bit more of the local knowledge on it, and then I'll ask Mike Fox just to come in and talk a bit about the Roads Recovery Fund in Dalbeattie and when we might get back on programme there in relation to moving back off of the urgent repairs we've done and back onto the kind of planned Roads Recovery Fund. So James first, thanks.
Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, sorry, I missed a little bit of the question, a little bit of break up on my connection, but in terms of picking up what Stephen was just saying there, Councillor Davison, in Dalbeattie, as far as I'm aware, the main issues were around the junction at the new school, and particularly on Port Road, and leading off Blair Street, I think it is, onto the High Street. I certainly took a visit out there on the evenings. I think it was a Thursday evening. So I think the Wednesday evening we were in Langham, and then the Thursday evening I was sort of looking out at Castle Douglas to see whether there were any issues there, and then later on Dalbeattie. Quite concerned about the issues identified at Blair Street, and the water coming onto the road there, and down Port Street as well. And I've spoken a little bit with the team about that. And that's an area definitely need to follow up. In terms of the other location in Dalbeattie that was identified, I think Brian was out in Dalbeattie Brian Templeton, my flood risk management team leader, was out in Dalbeattie earlier this week, meeting with residents at the properties opposite the school, and he has some further information from that site visit, which he'll bring back into the team, and I'm not promising immediately, but certainly an opportunity to discuss both these issues within the team, and with colleagues within the road service as well, who will obviously support us in terms of maintaining water courses and maintaining screens and things like that. So I know from speaking with the road service that we have a member of staff who's local to Dalbeattie who was having a little bit of an investigation as well. So there is an action upon myself and colleagues in the road service to follow up a little bit on this and determine maybe what some of the causes were in that particular location, beyond just obviously that it was very heavy rain in that part of the area. So we can provide further updates to members as we do more information. But from a point of view of the community, the more information we get back on their understanding of the flooding mechanisms, the better would be useful. So quite happy to take that offline with local members in that ward, if that would be useful.
Thank you, James. I think that would be appreciated.
John, can I just come on after what James has said about the flooding coming?
Certainly, Davy.
Thanks for your comments here. I think the biggest problem that led to the flooding that came down Blair Street onto High Street and Port Street, James, came from the Plantain Loch up in the wooded area. It had overflown and come right down the burn behind Craigmar, and I believe that's where somebody's house in Blair Street, the culvert got blocked, and that's how it had got diverted through the old man's. But thanks for your comments, because I went along on Thursday afternoon. I have to thank Stuart Cave and Charlotte Carson for their immediate work, and it was quite serious, the flooding. When I went back along on Friday morning, it dropped, but come 2:30 on the Friday afternoon, it started to rise again. It flooded 2 or 3 houses, and I think Rob had agreed to get the fire service to get a pensioner out of one of our houses. So I'd like to thank your staff, and what Rob said, your work was excellent through the 48-hour period. Thanks.
Just to pick up on that, certainly I would welcome very much that opportunity to for my staff and possibly myself to meet out on site there. I was aware of the water coming out onto Blair Street even as late on as Thursday night. So yeah, I think there probably are issues with the locations of culverted water courses coming off the woods. So some local knowledge there would be greatly appreciated.
I'd be quite happy to meet with James. I dare say Ian and Robbie as well.
Grand. Thank you very much, councillors.
Thank you. Councillor Howe, did you want to come in at this point?
Thank you, Chair. It's just following on from the discussion that you and I had yesterday with Harry up in the street at King Street. It's just a matter, if there are planned lists of maintenance for clearing of drains, etc., if they could be made available to members or even the public, I'm sure that'd be much appreciated. We always get these calls that no work has been done, whereas we know it has been, and it would just be beneficial if we could direct people to when they can expect a certain culvert or whatever to be cleared. If these lists exist, can they please be made available?
Yeah, I mean, yes, Councillor Howe, in terms of the culvert and culverted watercourses, so sections where the watercourse goes underground, and generally these are screened. We have works which we undertake with the road service or street scene colleagues to clear these screens or check and clear these screens depending on the time of year, so more frequently in the winter time than the summertime. But actually Mike's team also very reactive, so pre a storm event like we had, then there are additional resources put to clearing screens, so that we just make sure that the facilities can operate at their maximum capacity. That doesn't mean that screens don't still get blinded in a storm event, and it also doesn't mean that there isn't a lack of capacity within a culvert, so it doesn't matter how clean the screen is. There may simply be not enough capacity within the culvert to carry all the water reaching that point. But these lists of clearance and repair works that we undertake are available, and I can speak to Brian about sharing that information for the Stewartry area with local members there.
Thank you, James.
Thanks, James. That would be useful. Any other questions from members? Stephen, do you want to come in again? Stephen Herriot.
Yeah, just if Mike could come in and pick up the point for Councillor Davidson on the Roads Recovery Fund and Dalbeattie. I think that was a kind of outstanding question to be answered. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. I would also just like to take the chance to thank members for their very positive comments about the road service, and I will take these back to the members within the team, because they really do appreciate any type of feedback like that in a positive way. So thanks very much for that. Just on the Roads Recovery Fund, Councillor Davidson's absolutely correct. We have been still just doing what I would term tidy up work following the flooding event. I would hope, all things going well, that we'll be back onto Roads Recovery Fund operations within the sort of next week to 10 days. At the moment, that's the kind of time scale. And the intention is that, yes, we'll be in Dalbeattie to complete the town before we move on to the next one.
Thank you, Mike. If there's no further questions, can I thank Harry, Stephen, Liz, Vlad, James and Mike for their attendance at our Stewartry Area Committee meeting. Your input's been very, very useful. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Very welcome. Thanks, Chair. Thanks, members.
Moving on to the next agenda item. Agenda item 11 is the Area Committee. Oh, sorry. My apologies. Previous item, can we move to the recommendations? Recommendation 2.1 to consider the Communities Directory Stewartry area-based successes and development as detailed in the key successes section of this report. And 2.2, consider any aspects of performance to be referred to the Communities Committee. We agreed to accept the recommendations.
Agreed.
Agreed.
So moving on for a second time, the next item on the agenda is the Area Committee review. This report seeks members' views on future arrangements for area committees. This can include views on the frequency of meetings and on the remit. There will also be a series of workshops in December this year, 2021, which will take account of the points raised at all the area committees. The joint meeting of the full council and the youth council in September agreed for consideration to be given to youth council representation on area committees, and this committee is invited to give a view on that too. Elections for the new youth councillors are scheduled for this month. In fact, they're ongoing at the moment, I believe. Vlad is here to answer any members' questions or address any members' comments. Vlad, do you want to add anything at the moment?
Just to, I guess, highlight that the first request is in terms of just your overall views. So this is your opportunity to express those views in terms of not only the area committee setup, but also the particulars around the agendas and the frequencies and so on. And thereafter, again, just to highlight that request for your views on the council representation from the youth council representation that you may also input into. This will all go via the review of standing orders subcommittee and thereafter will feed into council.
Thank you, Vlad. Members will be well aware that we have 4 area committee meetings per year, and the Stewartry area, well, the chair and the vice chair, David, took a decision to cancel the September one this year because there was only reports from the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service in that, scheduled for that meeting. So, questions for the area committee to consider. Firstly, are members content with the remit of the area committees? Do you want to respond to the questions or respond individually with your thoughts on the future agendas and frequency of meetings of area committees? Members. Councillor Maitland, do you want to speak?
I think Councillor Howie got in there just before me.
Sorry, Councillor Howie.
It's not so much a question, it's just a general observation of having concerns of any perceived dilution of local accountability. I think we should avoid that as much as we possibly can. We are the ones that warn when we perceive centralisation from regional going up to the centre, and I'm equally concerned about decisions which could be made on a more locality base, as in the districts get swept away. So just my personal view, I have concerns on that front. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Howie. I would echo that. I mean, each of our communities served by our area boards have got different identities and different needs and different values, I believe. So I would echo your thoughts. Councillor Maitland.
Thanks very much. I think the area committees, if they are going to be allowed to fulfil their remit as it stands at the moment, actually are very important. And really, as far as I'm concerned, fulfil the requirement to provide information to our local communities about what is happening in their local area. I am in agreement with Councillor Howie. We do not wish to lose subsidiarity. We want to make absolutely certain that information is received in this particular instance at the right level, and that's where the services are received. And I would really make that very clear. What we're looking for is ward information, and I like the fact that it comes together in the Stewartry's area committee format, because it gives us an opportunity to have a look around and see what's happening with our fellow elected members and to receive information and to know what's happening. So I think I'm probably saying that I don't think there's an awful lot that needs to be changed substantially if we actually fulfil what is supposed to happen in that remit on page 86. Now, the second question is about young people, giving them an opportunity. Again, it's about services for young people that are happening locally, and perhaps giving the youth counsellors a voice to express that opinion in recognising what the performance has been locally. I have no difficulty with that. I think that's appropriate, and I would welcome that the level of input actually. So because it covers such a wide selection of young people, not simply the usual suspects who've got their eyes on Westminster or Edinburgh. It covers a much wider range of people, and I'm enthusiastic about that. Thank you, Chairman.
No, thank you, Jane. Councillor Stead?
Thanks, Chair. I'm quite agree with what Ian and Jane said about area committees. As you said, we did cancel one because the agenda was poor. I think we've had a good agenda today, and I think it's been quite beneficial. On the youth councils, I'm quite acceptable to have the young ones come on with their voice, because I think they do excellent work in their wards. But the only snag I've got would end up with voting rights, because when you look at some of the size of the areas, they could end up outvoting the councillors. So I don't know what would happen with voting rights, but Vlad could probably tell us on that in the future.
Vlad, would you like to come in?
Yeah, if I caught that question right, I'm not sure I heard it fully, is in regards to voting rights, that's not been considered at the moment, and there may be some legal implications to these things, so we would need to look at that thoroughly if that is something members would want us to consider.
That's fine, Vlad, Chair.
Thank you, Vlad. Thank you, Davy. No, I mean, today's meeting, I think, showed the power of the area committees in its response to the Dalbeattie flooding. We had a good analysis of what happened and what resources were used and how we're going to deal with it going forward. So that's a very positive wee incident. It just shows what can be done in a well-functioning area committee. Is any other members, elected members, got any thoughts on the future of area committees that they wish to make known? Okay, we'll move to the recommendations. We've 2.1, consider the remit, agendas and meeting frequency of area committees as outlined in the appendix. 2.2, provide views and youth council representation on area committees to the review standing order subcommittee. Are members happy to agree with the recommendations?
Agreed.
Thank you. Moving to the final item of the agenda. This final report presents to members a Stage 2 asset transfer application from local initiatives in New Galloway, Ling, for the transfer of the New Galloway Town Hall. Ingrid Gemmell is here to answer any questions or address any member comments on this community asset transfer. If there's no comments, or questions, can we move to the recommendations? Thank you. The recommendations, 2.1, consider local initiatives in New Galloway asset transfer request as laid out in the Stage 2 asset transfer application. 2.2, consider the outcomes of officer assessment of the request in relation to the Council's requirements to meet best value.
Chair, you have Pauline Drysdale would like to speak.
Sorry, Pauline, it's very difficult for me to see who's raised their hands, but please come in and speak.
Councillor Maitland as well.
Pauline.
Yes, hello. Thank you very much, Chair, for letting me in. Apologies for coming in late. It was just to say, Chair, I'm not too sure, but we probably need to seek clarification from Vlad or Ingrid on page 98, 3.9.2, whereby we've got to talk or look into clawback conditions A, B or C. I could be right, I could be wrong. I think we have to decide upon one of those clawback conditions. Could we take advice on that, please, Chair?
You're quite correct, Pauline. Vlad, you...
Assessing a community asset transfer is the viability of the group, and not just in the short term, but in the long term. And we've assessed this group to be albeit a small group, but a very resilient group with very established long-term plans. So we're quite comfortable and confident that the group will continue to operate well into the future and operate this asset very successfully.
Thank you, Colin. Councillor Drysdale, does that answer your concerns?
Thank you very much, Chair. Thanks very much, Colin. I too have utter confidence in Ling and what they have been doing and what they will be doing in the future. I suppose I will be frank, I do worry that in years and years to come, if Ling were to dissolve, there are concerns. But if the rest of the members here are happy with that, I will go with Offer's recommendations. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Maitland.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm very glad to go along with option one. I think that's appropriate, and it's been a long time coming. As far as the clawback is concerned, you know, the town hall is a grade 2 or B or whatever it is listed property. It has its own protections through that system, and you know, with the best will in the world, I think we would be ill-advised not to hand it over to the community, who will then put pressure on whichever organisation it is to deal with it in an appropriate manner, to look after it and to care for it, and to do the right thing by its conservation status. So I think we should go straight for option one with no strings attached, and good luck.
Thank you, Councillor Maitland. So moving on to the recommendations, if you bear with me while I read through them. 2.1, consider local initiatives in Galloway Lings asset transfer requests laid out in the Stage 2 asset transfer application. 2.2, consider the outcome of officer assessment of the request in relation to the Council's requirement to meet best value as detailed at paragraph 3.4.1 and officer recommendation at paragraph 3.9.1. 2.3, note the outcome of the social value assessment of the proposed transfer as detailed at paragraph 3.4.2. Agree to go with option 1 as detailed in paragraph 3.8. 2.5, agree to undertake 8-week public consultation in terms of the Community Empowerment Act in relation to the disposal of common good property as detailed in paragraph 3.2.9. And 2.6, agree that as a result of the common good status of the property, an application is made to the Sheriff Court to seek consent to alienation in terms of Section 75 of the Local Government Scotland Act of 1973 as detailed in paragraph 3.2.8. Are members happy to agree with the recommendations?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. You'll be pleased to know I have no urgent business, so that includes this meeting. Could I thank you all for your contributions and note that our next meeting will be held on the 16th of March 2022. Thank you all.
Thanks, Chair.